Alright, this video is going to target targeting and surveilling mosques. New York City implemented a policy and started monitoring the mosques and started getting a lot of good information. And then the mayor, Bill de Blasio, stopped it. And there's another Muslim video I'd like to cut in here and show you guys from an actual Muslim, Ammar Sharia, I believe is his name. Who did a video to support Donald Trump when he said, Donald Trump said we need to be monitoring Muslims, monitoring mosques and stuff like that. And he said, we're right, you're right, we do have a Muslim problem, and you do need to monitor the mosques and find out which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones, and then prosecute the bad ones. Now, this gives you a little, this is a Republican senator, representative, I can't remember, but he's talking about it, and he has a history, and he knows what went on when we did this voluntary let's be big brothers kind of scenario with the mosques. It's interesting, and just to see the relationship. So let's roll.
One way to prevent terror attacks here in the U.S. is to put mosques under surveillance in an effort to root out radicals. New York City once pursued but then abandoned such a strategy. Just a short time ago, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio was asked about Congressman King's suggestion. Listen.
I have a lot of respect for Peter King, but I think he's in the wrong place on this one. Secretary Johnson's right. The way to do a better job of knowing what's happening at the community level and knowing if there are some individuals who aim to do us harm is to deepen the relationship with the Muslim community, with all communities.
Okay, so that's Mayor de Blasio, the mayor of New York, the ultra-liberal New York. And let's see whether he has a clue or not. Because what he just said was to deepen the relationships between the Muslims and all that, and trust the Muslims that they're not doing anything wrong. So let's see the fact of the matter. What does history tell us? Does history tell us whether Mayor de Blasio is ignoring history, or whether he has a particular agenda that he's following, and that agenda requires that he ignore history? Let's see what is behind the man. Let's look at the evidence. Here we go.
Congressman out of New York and chairman of the House Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence. Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight in the Kelly File.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you.
By the way, that's why this gentleman knows as much as what he does know, because he's part of the counterterrorism committee.
Two things work together. Can you build relationships, inroads, gain the trust of those within the Muslim community who would be the first line of defense, but also at the same time, they be aware that you're surveilling their mosque?
Yes, in fact, listen, I actually get along personally with Mayor de Blasio, but we do disagree on this issue. And obviously, we should try to do both. But I can tell you that the example is right here in Long Island. And I would speak to New York City. I'll just confine this to Long Island. There's a number of mosques on Long Island where they welcome the police in, they have brotherhood meetings, and they have breakfasts,
wonderful,
et cetera, these community-type meetings. And then we find out later that they had radicals in those mosques. They had young men who claimed they wanted to do jihad. One actually, young man Venus, went to Afghanistan, where he was arrested fighting alongside Al-Qaeda. And he had gone to the mosque, told the mosque that he planned radical activity at the same time that these mosque leaders were meeting with the police. So there was this great friendship going on, but they never told the police what was going on in the mosque, never told them about this radical activity. There's another young man on Long Island arrested who belonged to different mosques.
So do you think that that mosque was a good mosque or a bad mosque? One that needed to be praised and thanked and developed relationships with, or one that needs to be surveilled without them knowing?
And the people in the mosque said, yes, they were radical, but they never told the police. We had in Boston the older Sanayef brother, who actually, on the positive side, he was actually ejected from a mosque because he was so radical, but on the negative side, that was never told to the police. So if they had told the police, it's possible, very likely, that the Boston Marathon bombing would not have occurred.
Oh, what did we learn just then? Even the good mosques that saw these radical Boston bombers, I think you guys recognize the pictures over to the right. They're the ones that blew up the Boston Marathon. Even the mosques who don't support radicalism refused to notify police that these guys are too freaking radical for us, we ran them off. So we can't trust any mosques until we verify. You ever heard the phrase trust but verify? Rock and roll. Let's go.
And again, there's another example in New York. There was an imam that the NYPD did trust. This is back in 2009. He was the one they trusted the most. And when the NYPD heard that a liquid explosive bomber was coming to New York to attack the subway system, he was being monitored, but they also knew he had other cohorts in New York City, and they went to this imam, asked for advice. Can you help us find out who these 3 other guys are? And the first thing he did is the imam they trusted, he contacted the suspect's father and tipped him off that the NYPD was looking for their son, who
Whoa, trust but verify.
was coming to New York to blow up the subway system. So no, you need both. You have to try to cooperate, but unfortunately, not enough mosques and not enough imams do cooperate.
I want to ask you about another report that we have today. This is overseas in London. As you know, there are a limited number of firearms officers, police officers who actually are carrying firearms and weapons with them. Roughly 6,000 or so is my understanding. We've got the president of the UK Police Foundation now saying he's actually worried that if a big attack goes down, that there won't actually be officers who have the defense mechanisms, the weapons on hand that they need to stop one of these attacks.
Okay, let's just pause for a minute. I did a separate video on this little segment right here, this Q&A by itself. But in case you missed that one, let's do it right now. What in the world would cause somebody to make a statement like that? All right, she just said that this London police chair of the police association or whatever, he's scared, and let me say scared to death, I can tell you how he feels, that he has, covering London, 6,000 police officers who have weapons, but in the event of a terrorist attack, oh crapola, them spread out all over London, what in the world is he going to do? You know, I mean, like if all of a sudden they attack the east side of London and he shifts all of his forces over to the east side of London to deal with this attack, and the attack was really designed for the west side of London, oh shit. Let's look at history. Let's see if we can learn something from history. I said this in the other video. When the Japan came over here with their Zeros, and they brought their aircraft carriers over as days before we had good radar and all that, they came over and they totally wiped out and decimated our Navy over there in Honolulu. Totally wiped it out. That was the only protection that we had between them and us. And then the Emperor of Japan, I think that was who that was. Anyway, he was all fired up. Yeah, we done wiped out their freaking Navy. Let's go kick their butt. And one of the admirals in Japan, who knew the American way of life and some of our values and knew enough about the United States, said that would be foolish, because when you step foot on the American soil, there will be a gun behind every blade of grass. Okay, so it wasn't the fear of our Navy, of our Army, of our National Guard, the Marines, Navy SEALs, anything like that. They're scared to death to step foot on this soil because of the humongous number of guns that the American citizenry holds. I've forgotten the statistics right now, I'm not looking at them, but there's more guns owned by the American public. I'm talking about multiple times more. I've forgotten what the numbers were. It's amazing that, like, there's no comparison. So many more guns owned by individuals than there is by the government and by the military, that they were scared to death to come over here and mess with us because they know people are going to defend themselves. So I don't know about London, hadn't looked up the rules and all that, but I would imagine because of that comment that he made, I'm going to learn here in a minute, but I'd be willing to say that London has the same kind of restrictive private ownership of gun laws that Paris had when Paris had that attack just recently over there and killed, what, 130 people? So yes, a pretty valid statement. I think I would answer this question a little bit different than what the representative had his answer. But you know, you have my answer right there. Let's see what he says. Just curious.
Yeah, they would probably know best. I would think the more firepower you have, the better, because when these attacks, if they do break out, you're going to have people heavily armed, able to respond very quickly. And
Heavily armed and respond very quickly. He is talking about American citizenry there, if you're talking about what's right now. Because we, the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. And if you really go into detail and you find out what that means that they can't have anything more than what we have access to. So you don't have a military police department running a police force run around town with guns that the private citizens themselves don't own. And so we do have an awesome force, an awesome amount and types of weapons as citizens of this country.
Manned personnel are spread out throughout London, for instance. It's going to be hard to get that much firepower, those who actually are armed, to get them to the scene. So I would say, again, I don't want to tell the British how to do their job. They're very effective in this, but having said that, I think what's happening in New York City should be the model for the world.
All right, Congressman, we know that folks are working around the clock here in New York City and across the country, the U.S., folks working 24/7 to keep us safe, whether we see it or not.
Right.
We thank them and we thank you for your time, sir.
Shannon, thank you, and Happy New Year.
You too.
All right, where he was talking about having New York as a model for the world. He was talking about their previous policy before the dingbat de Blasio took over of actually surveilling the mosques and gathering intelligence and using that intelligence to protect the American people. You can go check out my NSA video of how the NSA is being used and tie that with a video that's titled 9,500 terrorists with revoked visas still in this country, and start seeing the contiguous wheel of thought, the agenda of our current administration. And it's not just them, it's our government, period. The Republicans and the Democrats together in Congress making decisions that are slowly destroying this once great nation. So if you like the videos, like and share, and